This is Marie McCabe doing an interview for Historic Madison Incorporated. I'm talking to Eleanor Brown. It's February 21st, 1983. Oh, Mrs. McGowan, will you give your maiden name and tell where you were born in Madison?
My name was Eleanor Brown. I was born in Madison in 1892. Then in 1917, I married Robert Hayden. We lived together for over 55 years, and then he died. Later, I married Murray Sanborn McGowan.
And what part of Madison were you born in? Or did
I
you
was
live?
born in Central. I suppose you'd say the central part of Madison.
21.
And on East Gilman Street.
And you lived in one of those big houses up there on the hill?
Well, my grandmother and grandfather's store lived on Pickney Street, the corner of Pickney Street and Gilman Street. And I was born just across the street from them.
And how do you spell their last name?
Storer,
Mm-hmm.
Store.
Oh, yes. And what did your grandfather do?
Well, he was retired.
But he had been in business in Madison?
No, he was in business in the East.
Oh. And came out here to retire?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. When Mother and her brothers and sisters were little children, they came out to Madison.
Well, you grew up in that location then?
Yes.
And who were some of your neighbors there?
Well, there was the governor across the street, and Judge Bashford lived on one corner. My grandmother and grandfather Storer lived on the other corner. Then across the street were the Colonel Knight family, Knight, and across from them, which would be the fourth corner, was the old...
Keenan?
Well, I really have forgotten what the name of the people was that lived on that fourth corner.
And
A
what
beautiful old house.
What style home did you have?
Well, it was more Victorian than anything else, I would say.
Uh-huh. And the governor's mansion was Victorian, too,
Yes.
wasn't it? Uh-huh. There was that big Italian
Yes.
villa. I've forgotten the name of the people, too, that they call that. But, well, what did your father do?
He was in real estate and in banking.
Mm-hmm. And your mother stayed home?
Oh, yes.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I had one brother and three sisters. Two sisters, I'm sorry. Two sisters.
And
One.
what was your father's first name?
Frederick
Brown.
Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And his father was Timothy Brown. And he lived in a house on Gorham Street, just back of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you played with the other children in the neighborhood, I
Oh,
assume?
yes.
Uh-huh. And were your brothers and sisters older or younger than you?
They were older.
Mm-hmm. And where did you all go to school then?
Well, we went to the Madison schools. When my sister and I were older, high school age, we went to Milwaukee Downer College in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
And then after being through with high school, my brother and sister graduated from the university.
Mm-hmm.
I went on abroad.
Oh, you
I
did?
had a year in Italy.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we'll get to that again, but I wondered if you you said you had grandparents nearby, and you used to go over and see them, I presume?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Were your parents socially inclined? Do you know if they had lots
I
of
think
parties
so.
and dinners?
Yes, lovely parties.
You had some help in the house, I presume?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And do you recall your childhood and games you used to play in the neighborhood?
Well, I'll tell you, my brother and sister loved to play football. And they would play back of our house in a big yard next to my grandfather Brown's. And, of course, soon Mary was too large to play football, and she was denied that fun. But then Timothy liked to take boxing lessons, and then he sailed a great deal. We all sailed. And then he played golf.
And I suppose you were right there on the lake, that you all
yes.
learned to swim.
Yes.
And had boats and...
Yes, indeed.
Skated, ice skated in the winter.
Right.
That sort of thing. Well, that sounds like a great life.
Oh, it was.
I remember it as a
It was
very nice
fun all the
childhood.
time.
And with all your relatives. You said your grandfather Brown lived nearby, too.
Yes.
Oh, that was nice. Well, were you conscious of being better off than the
No.
other people in Madison?
No, we thought the whole world was just like we
I
were.
suppose. And you went shopping up on the square,
Oh, yes.
I suppose.
One thing that I realize now is that we always walked where we were going. We'd walk to the theater. We'd walk to shop. We'd carry our bundles home. And nowadays, of course, everybody drives.
Well, what were the streets like then?
There were macadam roads and wooden sidewalks. Sometimes the wood wouldn't be nailed down very tight, and it would bounce when we walked, which was fun. But no concrete, no cement.
And there were mostly horses and carriages?
Oh, yes. In front of the stores, there were the hitching posts.
Oh, I suppose.
Lots of fun.
What did you get around in? Did you go for drives in the country? Did you have?
Yes, we had horses and carriages, and we all had horses to ride. So we went horseback riding a great deal, and all around the town and out in the country. And where we lived now was simply woods.
Oh, out in this area?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
West.
it was all woods.
Yes, I suppose the town didn't go too much beyond the university, did it then?
It went about as far as the cemetery.
Oh.
And the streetcars that ran around the park would come out to the cemetery, and that was the end of the line. And the man would get out, the conductor would get out and turn something around on the top of the streetcar so it could go the other way and back to town again.
Oh.
That was lots of fun to ride on the
I
streetcars.
suppose, and it cost only a few cents, I imagine.
Yes.
And your parents allowed you, when you were pretty small, to do that?
Well, I usually was with a grown person going out on the streetcar.
And it went out toward Maple Bluff, too, then, didn't it?
No, the streetcar never went out to Maple Bluff.
Oh, it didn't?
No.
East Johnson.
We had our horses to go out there.
I see. Well, so where did you go to school first in grade school? Or you didn't go to kindergarten, I presume?
Yes, there was a Miss Wiley's kindergarten. Sometimes, some years, she was on State Street, and another time she was on Gorham Street. And I went to both kindergartens. I went to both places. And then I went to First Ward, which was later changed to Washington School, the Washington School. Now it's been torn down.
Oh.
That was on the corner of Broome and Johnson Street. Now I believe there are condominiums, new condominiums put up there.
And could you walk there?
Indeed, we did walk. Yes, sir.
Even in the winter?
Oh, yes. We weren't pampered one bit. And every Saturday afternoon, whether we liked it or not, we'd have to get dressed up and go to Cale's dancing school.
Oh.
And that was fun after we got there.
K-E-H-L? Kale? Seems to me that's the way it's spelled. But that's the one that's still there.
Yeah.
Oh. So what kind of dances did you learn?
The two-step and the waltz and a little Virginia reel.
And you wore your little white gloves and
Oh,
to
yes.
dance with the boys?
Oh, yes. And we carried our dancing shoes in a little party bag on our arm. We didn't like it a bit going, but we always had fun after he got there. So it wasn't so terrible.
Oh, and your friends were there.
Oh, yes.
And the little boys hated it more than the little girls.
Oh, yes. And they were told how to go up and ask a young lady to dance, make a little bow, and ask if they might have the pleasure of dancing. And you would get up and make a little courtesy and say thank you. And oh my, we were ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, I see.
Whether we liked it or not.
Oh, that's fun.
For a while, for an hour, we were very proper.
And what did you do on Sundays?
Sunday we would go to church.
What church did you go to?
We went to Congregational Church.
And that was over on East Washington?
Washington Avenue, yes.
And the whole family went? And,
Oh, yes.
in the horse and carriage, I suppose.
No, we walked.
You walked?
We walked, yes, indeed. And in the afternoon, we sat around, or we'd take a little walk. One afternoon, we started to play croquet over in Grandfather Starr's yard. And he came out and gave us a very severe lecture that was Sunday afternoon, and we should be quiet.
And you didn't play
So
games.
we put up the mallets, and we were quiet.
And you were quiet in church, too.
Oh,
in
yes.
Sunday school.
Yes, indeed.
And you wore little hats. And
Yes.
And for Easter, you always got a new outfit?
Yes, an Easter bonnet that was really a hat.
Well, now, with the square wasn't paved around for quite a while, was it?
No.
So you must have had a little trouble keeping your shoes clean.
Yes,
And there were street cleaners, I presume, to
yes.
take care of the horse leavings and the
Oh, yes.
snow.
Big sort of brooms that they would push, you know. And then there was the,
Sprinkler.
they call it a water wagon, a sprinkler water wagon that would go up and down the streets all summer long and keep them clean. It's very nice.
Oh, that's good. And the Capitol was an earlier one than we have now at
Yes.
that time, wasn't it?
Yes.
Burned out.
Were you around when they had the big fire?
Sure.
Yes, indeed. It was after, this fire began after a big dance that we had had. So we were awake, and as we were going to bed, Father noticed that the sky was very red over in the west, and he got us up in the attic where we could look at it, and we could see flames, and we could see the red sky from the fire. And in the morning after breakfast, we knew it was the Capitol then from the location of the flames. In the morning, we walked down to the square and looked at it, and it was a dreadful sight. The desks of the senators and so on were out in the Capitol Park in the yard. All sorts of valuable papers strewn around, chairs. Really was a miserable sight. And it still kept burning. And then they called into Milwaukee for the Milwaukee Fire Department to come out and help with it. Burned almost all day.
Did it? Oh. The whole thing didn't burn, though, did it?
Just dreadful.
Were there some wings that didn't burn, or did they have wings then?
I don't remember that they did. I suppose they did.
Well, then, shortly after that, I suppose they started rebuilding.
Oh, yes.
In the more permanent
Yes.
form.
Yes.
Do you remember other buildings around the Capitol Square?
Well, I remember all the stores around the square, and it was really a shopping area. There were grocery stores and hardware stores and drug stores and department stores.
What were the early department stores there? The early department stores.
Well, there was Kornhauser's.
Kornhauser, that's a new name
Yes.
to me.
That when the Kornhausers were through, I believe the Barron brothers came in. And then there's Burdick and Murray. And do you remember others?
Vossmaw.
Vossmaw?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hendricks.
Now there was, the City Hall was there at Wisconsin Avenue, wasn't it? And I remember that when we came. And
Yes, and the old Fuller Opera House
oh yes, Fuller Opera House.
was there.
And then that Christ Presbyterian Church was nearby.
Oh, yes.
Or
And the
Woolworth
Methodist.
building.
The Presbyterian Church, and then across from that was the Methodist Church, and then there was the Unitarian Church.
Oh yes.
Grandfather Starr had a great interest in the building of the Unitarian Church.
That was behind where Manchester's is now.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, the post office was where Manchester's building is.
Oh, I see. And there were some banks around the square, too, weren't there?
Oh, yes.
The American Exchange Bank.
Yes,
Same
First
farm.
National, the Trust Company.
Oh, yes. I understood that it was called the German Exchange Bank at
Yes.
first, until the
German
First
American.
War. German American.
Yes.
Were you conscious that there was quite a German element in the
No,
area?
no.
I interviewed Emma Glens, who lived just on Hancock and down a little ways on Livingston, and she lived in an area of quite a lot of German people.
She was
Yes.
German.
So she knew about it. Well, so when you went to grade school, it was in a brick building. It was a modern building.
Oh, yes.
And do you remember any of your teachers?
Yes, Miss Edgar was the principal.
Edgar.
Edgar.
Mm-hmm.
Edgar. She was a wonderful woman. Was an excellent teacher. And then there was a Miss Kavanaugh that taught 7th grade, and she later married Mr. Weaver.
Oh. And you went through 8th grade in grade school then?
Yes.
And you had a pretty good time in grade school as
Oh,
far as you
yes.
remember?
Yes, indeed.
Did you play games there? The usual circle
recess?
games. And,
I suppose so. Yes, but I was little, and the boys used to pick on me somewhat at recess. And one time, Milton Findorf, who became one of the contractors here in town, he and Walter Butler had a long rope. Should I tell this?
Yes.
And they caught me in this rope. So I didn't go out at recess very much.
Did they wind you up in it?
Oh, yes, and then ran.
Oh.
Oh, that was very exciting, but I didn't like it at all.
Oh, I see. Well, I wondered if you jumped rope.
She was very
Oh, yes. We
very
jumped
tall.
rope and we played jacks
Mm-hmm.
and Mumbly-peg.
Mm-hmm. And we used to play the farmer in the dell and
Oh, yes.
ring around the rosy type
Yes.
of thing. Uh-huh.
Run, sheep, run.
Mhm. Do you remember what kind of clothes you wore to school? Clothes that you wore?
Well, we dressed warmly, and Mary and I had little serge dresses, and then Father liked to see us wear a very ruffled apron with little ruffled straps over the shoulders when we wore these serge dresses.
A little pinafore type.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
No pants.
No, certainly no, no slacks in those days. And long stockings, I suppose.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. And in the wintertime, how did you keep warm?
In the wintertime, we wore hoods that tied under our chins
Mm-hmm.
and leggings come up to our waist.
Mm-hmm. Did you wear long underwear at all?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so frustrating when the warm weather came on in the spring and we'd want to take this heavy underwear off, and Mother would say, well, we'll wait a few more weeks. And we always did. Oh, we were glad to get out of the underwear.
Oh, yes, I remember that too. And did you have button shoes in those days?
Yes, high button shoed. Mhm.
So that took a little while to get dressed, didn't it? And what about your hair? Is it long and
Yes, our hair was long. We'd tie it back with a ribbon.
or braids, I suppose?
Yes,
Some people have
braids.
Uh-huh.
I had curls, which are a big nuisance.
But much admired, I'm sure.
I don't know. Not by me.
So you walked to school with your sister, primarily.
Yes.
And, excuse me, so you had usual subjects in grade school, and what year then did you graduate from grade school?
My heavens.
I suppose when you were about 14?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
About 1906
Yes.
would have been.
Yes, I would say so.
Mm-hmm. And did you have commencement?
I must tell you, we didn't call it graduating in those days. We simply passed.
Oh, you passed.
Yes, we passed.
But you had some sort of little exercises when you were through school, didn't you? Or don't you remember having
Not
any
much.
formal?
No, we didn't.
You didn't. You just got
No.
through. No recitations or anything like that. You remember having spelling bees in school?
No, we didn't. The
Didn't?
teachers were very particular about our spelling, gave us spelling lessons,
We had spelling.
but we didn't have any celebration about knowing how to spell correctly.
I see.
Indeed not.
I see. So your summers were spent then with having riding and
Yes,
games and just
Yes.
playing with your friends and
swimming.
neighbors.
and out at Maple Bluff. We went over to Maple Bluff every right after the 4th of July. We'd go over to Maple Bluff until school began again in September.
You had a summer place there.
Oh, yes.
Oh, tell me about that.
Sure.
Well, it was just a little old cottage
It was
and
nice
a barn
big
in
house.
back where we had the horses.
Oh.
That was before there were any deliveries at the Bluff. We used to have to bring the ice for refrigeration of foods out in the back seat of the carriage, just done up in newspapers to keep it from melting until we got there, and we'd have to go in town for the mail. Later on, however, there was a marine delivery, and there was a boat that came all around the lake to the cottages, and you would know when the mailboat was coming and be down there to get the bunch of mail that belonged to all the cottages.
Oh, that's
Yes.
great. So lots of people had cottages there,
Well, a few, not a lot, no. Mm-mm.
but you had neighbors.
Yes.
How large a lot did you have there?
Oh,
Oh, a very large lot.
Several acres?
Acres, is acres it?
Uh-huh.
I suppose.
Well, that must have been lots of fun. And you had
Oh, it was fun, but I was in disgrace one time because Colonel Poole lived on the Bluff too. And at that time he was Major Poole. Well, his commission or whatever to advance him to colonel came by mail. And it was my day to pick up the mail. And it was a very rough day and windy. And I stood down at the pier and reached out to get the mail from the mailman who would hand it to me. And this commission of Colonel Poole's flew off into the lake. Well, the mailboat coming was always a very exciting time for all the children. So there were plenty of children on the pier with me, and the boys saw this blowing off onto the waves and plunged in and got it and brought it back. So when Colonel Poole got his commission, it was quite wet and soggy.
it had to be an important piece of mail.
Oh, it meant a great deal to him. And he was furious with me.
Oh.
But he got over it.
Oh, yes, I'm sure. Well, who were some of your friends out there during the summer?
Well, the Lyman family came up from Chicago.
Lyman?
They had a cottage down near where the mailbox, near the where the bluff slanted down to the lake. And then there was
Gene Frederickson.
dear me, there were very few children out there.
Gene Frederickson.
There were my cousins, the Frankenbergers, had a cottage out there, Professor Frankenberger, and the two daughters.
And there was a banking family that,
Well,
was
there
on
was
there.
Napoleon van Slyke. He was a First National Bank man, and they had a cottage up 2 or 3 doors from us.
Ramses.
But there were no children there.
So you mostly played with your own
Yes,
sisters and
and our cousins.
and your cousins.
Yes, Uncle Frank was there too, and he had 2 daughters we played with.
Well, you didn't. This was just an ordinary cottage. You did
That's all.
have plumbing in it.
Later on, oh yes, later on.
Mm-hmm.
But at first it wasn't that way at all. It was very crude. There was no water out there. Well, there was water that we pumped.
But you had outdoor
ground.
facilities
Sure.
and.
Yes.
Oh well. Did you take your help along so your mother still
Yes.
had some help in the
Yes,
kitchen?
and they never liked it. They were always glad when we came back to town.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because it was much harder out there with an
yes.
old wood stove,
And carrying the water.
Yes.
And
heating the water, everything.
Oh, yes. And I suppose doing the laundry out there was no fun.
No, of course not. Hot days.
Oh, but still, it's great for children.
Oh,
isn't
it was fine for us. We loved it.
Well, then, I was going to ask if in grade school were your teachers all pretty much women?
They were all women.
All women. No
Yes.
men at all. All through eight grades.
Well, in high school too, I didn't have any man teachers.
Oh. And did you go to Central High then?
For 1 year, yes, freshman year.
And that's.
And then I went to Milwaukee Downer.
And then you went to Milwaukee Downer.
Yes,
Well, you were pretty elite then, weren't you?
yes,
To go off to school. And did you like it in Milwaukee?
very
Oh,
much.
you did.
Oh, very much.
And tell her why you went to Italy.
Well, did your sisters go to Milwaukee Downer
Yes,
too?
yes.
Oh, yes.
She went there 2 years, and I went there 2 years.
Oh. Now, did your parents think you'd get a better education there, do you think? Or didn't they like the people you'd be associating with?
Well, I don't think they thought that we would get a better education, but they thought that we were spending too much time going to parties and just having fun
Oh,
and not getting down to business.
I see.
And so we were sent to Milwaukee Downer to get on to the study.
And this was a girls' school?
Yes.
Where you wouldn't have as much social life?
No, not any.
No. Well, I would think that you would have missed Madison
I did miss it very much.
and your friends.
Yes.
Who was the governor then?
Davidson.
Well, when I was a very little girl, it was Governor Schofield. And then I don't really remember any other. There was Governor Davidson's later, James O. Davidson.
But they didn't have children that you
Well,
lived
yes,
with.
they had two daughters. One was Mabel Davidson, who was much older, and then there was Grace Davidson, who was our age and also went to Downer.
Oh, she did.
Yes,
So you got to know her pretty well
Oh,
then, I
yes.
presume.
yes.
Um,
Then before that, there was Robert LaFollette and his children. We had lots of fun with Bobby and Phil.
I thought maybe the little Follett's were in there somewhere.
Oh, yes, they
Uh-huh.
were. And then their older sister was Fola, and she became an actress and married George Middleton. And when she went east to be his wife and be an actress, on their apartment door it was George Middleton and Fola LaFollette, and we all thought that was really disgraceful that she didn't call herself Mrs. Middleton.
That was an actor's way of doing it,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Very advanced. Well, what sort of course did you take when you were at Milwaukee Downer?
Oh, just the regular things. Mathematics, history, English.
Mm-hmm. And did was it college preparatory?
Oh, yes,
You all
indeed.
assumed you'd go on.
Oh, very.
This is side 2 of the interview with Eleanor Brown. I wanted to ask you how you got to Milwaukee to go to
On
school.
the train.
Aha. And how often did you come home?
Only at regular times like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and that's it.
Oh, so you really were away at school.
Yes, indeed.
Uh-huh. Did your parents come to visit
No,
occasionally?
no.
So you
We
were...
kept in touch. Well, Mother would come in once in a while
Mhm.
on a Saturday, and we'd go into lunch at Chapman's, which is now gone, I believe.
Is it really? Chapman's?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, what was Milwaukee Downer like then? Was it several buildings?
There was the seminary, which was high school, and then there was college there, and there was the seminary building and the college building, and the school, the school part was in the center. The college on one side and the seminary on the other. Then later on, it was all college, and the seminary, a new building for the seminary, was built across the street.
Oh, and it was rather pretty big school?
Yes,
And
yes.
you liked the girls who went there?
Oh, very much. It was very nice.
Were they primarily Milwaukee girls, or did they come from around the state?
Well, there were the day students, which were Milwaukee girls. They would come out in the early morning and stay until classes were over in the afternoon. But the boarding girls were from away, from out of town. Mostly girls from the state.
Mhm.
But there were some from Illinois. There were some from farther off. But these were the boarders.
And you enjoyed it there?
Yes,
And
it was delightful.
you had to work fairly hard?
Yes, we worked very hard, but there was nothing to interfere with it.
Mhm.
No dances, no boys, nothing like that. And so we did very well.
Oh, good. But you were glad to get home, I presume, at vacations,
Delighted, yes, delighted. And then we had lots of dances and lots of fun.
especially at Christmas, I'm sure.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
How did your family celebrate Christmas?
Well, Christmas Eve, we would go to bed early, and we would hear Father and Mother bring presents down from the upstairs where they had been hidden, and to put around the tree and decorate the tree. So we didn't see the tree until after breakfast Christmas Day. And then,
They put the tree up just the night before?
oh yes,
Oh.
but we were in bed, and it was a secret. And they would light the tree with candles. Imagine that. Little candles all over the tree and no fire. Just all very safe, apparently. And we were allowed to go in after we had had a good breakfast. We couldn't skip breakfast. We had to eat our regular breakfast and wait until the tree was lighted. Then we were allowed in. And it was a big thrill. Well, the night before Christmas, Father and Mother would pack some boxes and baskets, and the coachman come in and would take these around to different people that they knew of.
Oh. Uh-huh.
So it was a very busy Christmas Eve.
Did you go to church services then?
Not on Christmas, no, we didn't.
Unless it happened to be a Sunday, I suppose.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have Christmas dinner over at grandmother and grandfather's stores. And that was always lots of fun. And all the cousins were there to play with. And
Did you have a big turkey dinner? Do you
Big
remember?
turkey dinner and a great big long table because there were so many of us. And just before the fun began, our uncle would dress up like Santa Claus and be upstairs with sleigh bells around him, and then come down saying, "Ho, ho, ho, Merry Christmas," and the sleigh bells would tinkle, you know, and we were all so thrilled. Then he'd distribute the presents from around the tree.
Oh, I see.
Well, that went on year after year until we're all grown.
Well, a wonderful tradition.
Yes,
You
it
look
was lovely.
forward to that. And where were the dances held?
The dances?
Mm-hmm.
Well, mostly at Kale's.
Oh, at the studio.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Then later on, the women's building was built, and dances were held there.
Who would sponsor them? Do you remember? Individual families or?
Yes.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so you knew lots of young people, and
Oh, yes.
and did you go out with boys then on individual dates during high school? And when you
Oh,
were
yes.
home? Mhm.
Yes, indeed.
Do you remember some of their names?
Oh, yeah. Murray was one.
Oh, he was.
Yes. Yes.
Murray McGowan.
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
So our acquaintance dates way back.
And some others. Do you remember others?
But there was Jerome Head and Charles Brandt and Tom Coleman.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Was
And
this
of
just a
course-
certain group that of families who knew each other pretty much?
Yes, I think so.
Mm-hmm. And what would you wear? Do you remember?
Well, our dresses were rather elaborate. They were specially made by a dressmaker, and they're very pretty. Now the girls, if you would like to know, I told you some of the boys, was Florence Bardeen and Margaret Brittingham, Dorothy Hubbard, Jean Frederickson, Catherine Head.
Mm-hmm.
These are their names before they were married.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It was a high school group.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like great fun. And then would you go to homes afterwards for refreshments? And,
Sometimes,
mhm.
yes.
Mhm.
Sometimes it was too late. But one of the nice things about it was when the dances were over, we could all walk home without any fear of being disturbed in any way at all. And at 12 o'clock, the arc lights would go out. And then it was really night and very mysterious. I loved that part.
Were you allowed to stay out that late?
Well, we could stay until the dance was over.
Oh, uh-huh.
But my parents always knew about how long it would take me to walk home
Mhm.
from wherever we were. And I was expected to be there then.
And they were looking for you.
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh. Well, it sounds like great fun. And what else might you do on a date? Did you go to the theater, to movie? There weren't movies, I presume.
Well, later on there were movies,
Mhm.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd have picnics.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh. And I presume that you would go out on the boat and that
Oh,
sort of thing
yes.
in the daytime.
And horseback riding.
Were there tennis courts then?
Yes, there were, I think, around the university.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't play tennis.
Oh. Well, there was plenty else to do.
I don't think we're a very athletic bunch.
Oh, uh-huh.
Maybe the
Probably-
boys were.
Probably the girls were not expected to be.
No.
They were little ladies then. Uh-huh.
That's right.
And I presume at Downer you wore the skirts and long,
Yes.
long skirts.
Yes, oh yes.
And waists.
Skirts came way down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And the long sleeve blouses and
Right.
high necks sort of thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And wore your hair up, I presume. when you got
Yes.
to- Well, then after Downer, you was that when you went on your trip to Italy?
Yes, yes.
And was this sort of a graduation gift?
No, no, indeed. No, Father just wanted me to go.
Oh.
And so I went. My cousins had gone before me. It was Miss Sheldon's school in Florence. And both my cousins had been there.
I see.
And they said that I really should go. Mother, Father agreed and thought it would be fine, and so I went. And it was extremely nice. I just
Now, was this a sort of
enjoyed it.
finishing school?
You might call it that.
Mm-hmm. And there were other American girls there?
Yes, we were all Americans.
All
There were
American?
14 of us.
Oh.
Yes.
And you were there for a year?
Yes.
And what did you learn there?
Well, they specialized in Italian history and Italian art.
Oh.
That was the main thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun to study about these wars and then go out and see the battlegrounds, all that sort of thing in Rome.
Oh.
During Christmas vacation, we were taken on trips. We just didn't stay in Florence. We went to Rome, or we went to Spain, or we went around. And it was wonderful.
And there was so much to see in Florence.
Yes.
Oh, my. Oh, that would have been a great treat.
Oh, yes, it was.
And there was a woman, this Miss Sheldon, was in charge of the 14
Yes.
girls. And so...
We never could go out without a chaperone, however.
Did you learn to speak any Italian, or...?
One week we had to speak Italian, and the next week we had to speak French.
Oh.
Until 7 o'clock in the evening, and then we were allowed to speak English.
I see.
And even when we're just learning French or just learning Italian, we had to confine ourselves to that language of the week. Early in the morning, when the maid came in with the hot water, we would have to know what week it was and say buongiorno if it was an Italian week, or bonjour if it was French. And if we didn't say the right word, it was a demerit.
Oh, goodness. Well, you learned fairly fast then, I presume.
Well, we really had to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that was quite a lot to learn 2 different languages.
Well, it was difficult for me because it was taught in French, and I had never had any French. So I had to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But we got it.
Well, I suppose you did, but you were very glad when 7 o'clock came, weren't you?
Delighted. Yes.
So you were there for a whole school year,
Yes.
I take it.
Yes,
And you
that's
traveled around Europe
Yes.
somewhat, by train.
Yes. Oh, yes.
All 14 of you with...
Well, now there was a carry-all automobile for some of the trips around Florence,
I see.
but not as a rule.
Uh-huh.
That was when we were going up in the mountains or some far-off
sort
place.
of a-
Then we'd have the
A
carry-all.
little bus. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Oh, I meant to ask you, back in Madison, do you remember the first cars that, seeing
Yes.
them on the street? And
Yes.
did the horses get pretty frightened?
Oh, dreadfully. We had a little Buick to start with. That was our first car, Father's first car.
Oh.
And,
About when?
well, I would say maybe about 1908,
Uh-huh.
8 or 9. Do you think that's right, honey?
Yeah, earlier.
Yes. And the men, when they'd see a car coming down the street, would jump out quickly and hold their horse's bridle until we had gone by. And we always go very slowly by the horse, so it wouldn't really get act up too much. But they would rear up on their hind legs, and it was really pretty hard for them for a while.
And did your mother wear the motoring costume with the veil
Yes.
over the head?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And I suppose you went for rides then out in the country when you had a car.
No, we didn't. Father and Mother did.
Uh-huh.
But the children weren't allowed to run the cars at all.
I see.
No, indeed.
I thought maybe you would remember the rough roads and flat tires and that
I
sort
remember it when Father took us out for a drive or a ride, but we couldn't go ourselves.
of thing. Oh, no, I meant with them. Uh-huh.
Yes.
Oh, yes. So now you're into cars. So You enjoyed that year in Florence,
Very much.
and then when you came back, what did you do?
Went to university.
Oh, And what course were you taking?
Letters in science.
Mm-hmm. And what did you plan to do when you finished, or what did you do?
Well, I got married.
I wondered if you had expected
No,
to
I
teach.
didn't graduate from the university.
Oh,
No. I had 2 years in the summer school.
Mm-hmm.
And then Robert Hayden and I were married.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end of my adventures abroad.
What was he doing?
He was in investments.
Oh, and a little older than you, so had he
Little
finished
bit.
school?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And this was quite often the case in those days, wasn't it? That
Yes.
the young ladies got married.
Yes.
And at about that age.
Never thought of a career.
No. Well, there were mostly women, if they did anything, was teaching, as I recall.
Right.
There was very little else. Well, when you were on the university campus,
Yes.
you enjoyed the courses and the.
Yes, very much.
Did you stay on the campus, or did you come from home?
Oh, I came from home.
Mm-hmm.
And we would walk up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
We would walk to school. And in the spring, we would have some classes out on the grass, which was lots of fun. But mostly in the classrooms, entirely in the classrooms.
And did you belong to a sorority?
No, I didn't. My family were all Delta Gammas, and I had a very good friend that was a Kappa. So she went Kappa, so I didn't go anything, so we wouldn't be separated.
Oh, I see. That's easier.
Wasn't that the limit?
Yes. Well, where did you live then after you were married?
We went down to Chicago.
Oh.
Because that's where my husband's business, where he had his job.
Mm-hmm.
He earned $110 a month, and the $10 extra was because he was married. So they gave him a $10 raise.
So that's...
And
we... in a war in the meantime.
Oh, yes, that's right. This was...
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember the reactions in Madison to the war? Did it affect lives very much?
Oh, they're very patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. And from every home that had a boy go to war, there was a little red flag that hung in the window.
And what about
signifying.
your brother?
Yes, he was in the Navy.
And but I presume the university kept on going. And,
Oh, yes.
And you were conscious of the legislature, the government going on.
Yes.
I suppose you saw comings and goings from the governor's house too.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm. Important people.
Very exciting.
Was that the name of the people up there? Keene, by chance? Keene, K-U-E-H-N, in one of those homes?
I don't remember that.
Doesn't seem right.
That's the Milwaukee baseball coach.
Oh, just occurred to me that I thought that was the name of that one house.
Keenan, was it Keenan?
Oh. Well, do you remember the professors you had and anything in particular about them?
I don't believe so.
And you registered at the old Red Gym then, or up on the hill? You remember where you started?
Corner of Park Street, State.
Oh,
Well, there was a
administration.
private house that was made into a registration building
Oh,
on University Avenue.
I see.
I don't believe that's there now. I don't believe they do that now. But we stood in line for a long time and finally got up to the little window where we registered.
And do you remember were there football games
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one football game, and we were sitting on this side of the field in the old Camp Randall. The seats all fell down,
Oh.
and there was much confusion. I don't think there are any serious injuries as far as I know, but it sounded like a cluster of firecrackers going off, these seats falling. It was in the bleachers across from the regular, what do they call it?
Grandstand.
Oh.
Grandstand, yes.
Oh. Uh-huh.
And President Van Hise used to come out and watch the football games on horseback.
Oh.
And he'd stand, the horse would stand on a track that went around the field, you know, and he'd have a perfect view of everything. Sit there on his horse till the game was over. Now I'm beginning to recall some of the professors. One was Professor Albright,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe he later left that work and had a bank in Wingra Park.
Oh.
That's right.
Yes. And then there was a Professor Young
Mm-hmm.
and a Professor Cerf,
Karl was a fish.
and he was they're all very good, very interesting.
Uh-huh. So you enjoyed your classes?
Yes. And Professor Catell
Oh.
was the French teacher.
Oh, and you had had so much French now. You were taking advanced
Yes.
classes.
Yes, that was rather easy.
Mm-hmm. And you were up in North and South Hall for your classes, and
No, all my classes were in Main Hall.
in the old Bascom Hall. I see.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yes, Letters and Science was there, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, that sounds delightful. Now you were dating this young man
Yes.
who was from Madison.
No, he was from Kentucky.
Oh, how did you meet him?
Well, one of my sister's friends brought him up to Karl after Christmas vacation. It was around New Year's time, and before his classes began, and introduced us.
I see.
And from then on, we had a friendship.
Oh. And developed into marriage and
Yes.
for 55 years.
Yes.
Well, when did you come back to Madison then? After you were married? Still going.
I think that must have been about 1922.
Oh, so you'd been married for just a few years?
Yes, we were married in 1917.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, uh-huh. And so you came back, and did you find Madison changed a bit? Was growing and...
Well, yes, I think so. The wooden sidewalks were gone,
Mm-hmm.
and the streets were Macadam streets instead of dusty roads.
Oh, you mean
The square was
Cement.
about the same.
Cement Street.
Mm-hmm. But I presume that the city was spreading out a bit.
Oh, yes,
Mhm.
it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed.
And did you have children then?
My children were born here in Madison,
they
yes.
were. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And where did you live?
26 different places.
Where did we live?
Were you out in Maple Bluff then? Was Maple Bluff a community? Or?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes, we built a house in Maple Bluff.
I see. So it was not just cottages out there anymore.
Oh, no,
In
those are
wild.
disappearing.
Uh-huh.
And permanent homes came in.
Mhm.
And we built on the bluff on Firewood Drive. And the Mautz family are in the house now, which we
Oh.
built.
Uh-huh. And were your parents and grandparents still living in up on the hill there?
Well, the grandparents had gone.
Oh. Mm-hmm. I suppose
Father
they would
had
have.
gone, yes.
Oh. Uh-huh.
Mother was still living on Gilman Street.
I see. Uh-huh. So she was glad to have you back in
Yes,
the
I
city.
think so.
And how many children did you have then?
3. I had 2 boys, a girl.
And did they go to school out in that area? was
They went to Wisconsin High and Lakewood School for the primary grades.
oh, Lakewood was built
Yes.
then, but not the new building that there is now.
Yes, the new building
Oh.
later on.
I see.
Yes.
And in the 20s, do you remember the Prohibition days and the Speak-easies
Oh, yes,
and that sort of
indeed.
thing?
Yes.
Did you go to any of those?
No.
No, you
No.
just knew about them.
Yeah, I knew about them.
Uh-huh. And so you had a social life with other young families.
Yes, right.
Uh-huh. And Madison was expanding somewhat. Were you ever involved with any of the people in the government?
No.
Just more business people, I
That's
presume.
right.
Uh-huh. I was wondering if you knew university people, if they were part of your circle, the professors and the academics.
No, I wouldn't say so.
And were you having shorter skirts and shorter hair by
Oh,
this
yes.
time?
Oh, yes. They had come in.
And where did you do your shopping then? You still
Around
down
the
on the square? Uh-huh.
Yes, indeed.
And some of the stores like were Woldenberg's and
Yes,
the
they were
Emporium
there.
and things were there.
Right.
Uh-huh. And
It was very much a shopping center.
I remember when I came in the 40s, we used to go always. That's the only place you could shop. And
Exactly.
Thursday nights the stores were open.
Yes.
It was a big event. Well, I did want to ask about back the ways if you went ice skating and if you remembered an ice skating rink at
Oh, yes.
Breese Stevens
Yes,
Field.
indeed.
Uh-huh.
And there's a great deal of skating out by the university, just off the university buildings, a rink
Mm-hmm.
that was enclosed, canvas walls.
Oh.
That was very nice.
And you said that there were football games and they were pretty popular. And
Yes,
was there
right.
also basketball?
Yes.
So did you and all your friends go to all the games? And
Oh, we
enjoy it?
did. And we would be there early to see the very first kickoff for football games and the very beginning of the basketball games.
Do you remember hazing on campus?
Oh, I do, and that was dreadful. You would see these freshman boys being pulled across the campus, across the road, and down over the rocks into the water. I thought that was dreadful.
And you wore little green caps, you said.
The boys
The
did.
boys did.
Yes,
yeah.
the freshman boys did.
Freshman beanies. They
Yes,
were called, weren't
that's
they?
what it was.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And do you remember May Day activities on the campus? Did you remember taking Phi Ed? Did you have gym classes?
Yes, yes. And I took archery. I don't know if they have archery now or not,
Uh-huh.
but that was kind of fun. We'd go out into a field somewhere near Wingra Park,
Oh.
and the targets would be set up, and we'd have to hit the bullseye. That was kind of fun.
And did you play field hockey?
No, I didn't play hockey.
Oh, I remember doing that. What did you wear for that, for your gym classes? Do you recall?
Well, if it was outdoors like archery, we just wore our regular clothes.
Mm-hmm.
But for gym classes in Lathrop Hall, they were, we'd wear bloomers and blouses.
Oh, yes. And Lathrop Hall was there then?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
Lathrop Hall was very new,
Mm-hmm.
a very new building, very nice.
Well, do you have any other memories about the university? Going to classes and going to dances?
Lots of dances.
You knew so many people in town. I presume you went
Oh,
to all
yes.
of the
Yes,
military ball and
Oh, yes.
there was ROTC or something like
Yes.
that then. And during the war, you were there during the war?
Yes, I was.
So I suppose the boys were
She
training
was
to
married during the war.
training to go off to.
Oh, yes.
Uh-huh.
Then there was a woman's building that had a cafeteria
Oh.
in it on the ground floor,
Mhm.
and we have lunches there.
Was Chadbourne Hall there then?
Yes, indeed.
So there
Earlier
were,
on, it was called Ladies' Hall.
oh, was it?
That was when the girls were first allowed to go to the university,
Uh-huh.
because it started out without the women
Mhm.
and later became coeducational. And then Ladies' Hall was built to accommodate out-of-town people.
And did you climb up that big hill up to?
Oh, yes,
That was
every step of the way.
in your long skirts. And,
Yes.
hmm
It was quite a task.
And you'd have to in the wintertime. There must have been a problem with deep snow, wasn't there?
There were.
With
There
this-
was lots of snow, yes.
Did they clear the streets then? Plow the streets?